In this video, we are revisiting Cassava Sciences and the controversy that has ensued around this company and its research. In today's world, everybody has an agenda. Sometimes in plain sight, easy for everybody to understand. Sometimes it's a hidden agenda, which makes it much more difficult to really decipher, to know, and to separate fact from fiction, truth from lies. Here at HealthWealth, my role is not to judge. In fact, I have my own agenda, and my agenda is to help you become a better investor. And the best way I can do this is by showing you all sides of the story, the good, the ugly potentially, and present it in a factual and objective manner without judgment so that you, in the end, hopefully, are enabled to come to your own conclusion and make up your own mind. Because that ultimately is the best that I can do for you, and I hope that this is the value that you see in following my content, and hopefully this in the end will make you a better investor. Although I have a PhD in biomedical engineering and over 15 years of working experience in the healthcare industry, I do not intend to give you investment advice. Please consider your own risk profile before making any investments and research your investments wisely. My previous video on Cassava Sciences, I leave a link in the description below, gathered a lot of interest and a lot of views, much more actually than I had initially anticipated when I decided to finally cover Cassava Sciences. Admittedly, the video and the perspective from which I made that previous video was really from a point of view that you get when you follow the news releases and the press releases from Cassava Sciences. However, being an objective scientist, I feel I owe it to my viewers to explore both sides of the story. As most of you know, Cassava Sciences has been viciously attacked by shortsellers, and this has ensued a lot of controversy and has had a huge impact on the stock price. Now, I fully realize that there is probably a camp of Cassava Sciences lovers and Cassava Sciences haters, but in the end, being an investor, you need to keep an open mind, and therefore, without a judgment, I'd like to explore some of the points of views that the short sellers are raising versus the argumentation, the points of views that Cassava Sciences are raising. So, in an effort of providing objectivity, I took the plunge and I dove into the deep, deep rabbit hole to explore ultimately what these guys, or who these guys representing, basically had to say. It took a lot of time, so I would definitely appreciate if you keep an open mind, you follow me along the journey, so that also you can just for yourself see and hear both sides of the story, and in the end, well, I cannot make a decision for you which of the two sides really tells the truth. As always, that's very difficult actually in this case, as you will undoubtedly see in the video, but at least by exploring both sides, hopefully you can make a more informed decision of who of the two sides you choose to believe and how that may influence your investment decision. So let's take a look at the stock price and some of the events that happened and impacted the stock price. You can see Cassava Sciences actually initially went up quite a lot, reached 135 and then started to drop down from 117 around the August time frame, which coincides precisely with the whistleblower submission by the law firm Labaton Sucharow. You can see that the stock price has remained much lower ever since, with a few fluctuations. You see then again the stock price increasing here, and this was after the Journal of Neurology had stated that they found no evidence of data manipulation. And then you see again a sharp decline in the stock price over the next couple of days. And this coincides ultimately with another, perhaps very timely, second submission by the law firm Labaton Sucharow, again with the supplement, or the third supplement actually, to their citizens petition. that was submitted. And also in that time frame, the SAC launched an investigation into Cassava Sciences. This, of course, linked to their reporting and the stock price. Actually, the fact that the SAC are investigating Cassava Sciences comes from the Wall Street Journal article. And that article is also attached actually to the third supplement to the citizen petition that the law firm Labaton Sucharow had filed in November with the FDA. Then also on November 3rd, Quintessential Capital published a paper on their findings and investigations into Cassava Sciences. And, well, no surprise, Quintessential are also likely shorting the stock based on their findings. At this point in the video, I will not go much into the details of this particular research, but there were also other scientists who in the same time frame published their own findings, and I'd just like to highlight those. And on November 3rd, another piece of research on Cassava Sciences has been published by this group with these researchers who also disclose that they may hold stock and stock options that may benefit from a decline in the Cassava stock price. And with that many pieces of research from all different sides into the science and scientific integrity and work on Cassava Sciences, it is impossible to summarize everything in one short video. So for the purpose of this video, I will predominantly pick some key main points from the filing of the law firm Labaton Sucharow. And if there is interest, you can let me know in the comments to go into more details on the other pieces of research into cassava science. I can certainly cover those in future videos if there is interest. Before we dive deeper into the subject matter, I find it best to introduce the characters of our story. Of course, I leave the decision up to you who you deem are the protagonists and antagonists. I cannot make that decision for you. I will try to, as objectively as possible, shine a light on the unfolding story from both sides. The law firm Labaton Sucharow, who filed the citizen petition, are representing two medical doctors, and those are David Brett and Geoffrey Pitt. So let's take a look at who those two are. So when we Google Dr. David Brett, we quickly find out, of course, that he is a neuroscientist with quite a lot of credentials. Let's first follow the breadcrumbs and see what we find. So it seems that he just very recently joined MPM Capital to strengthen the team with his neuroscience R&D, well, research expertise and so on. And when we look a little bit closer, we see here a little bit of his bio. Before he joined, he was the site head for Johnson & Johnson's R&D campus in La Jolla, and with a focus, of course, on neuroscience, immunology, and biotechnology, and so on. Notably, of course, we find information about him also in the submission by the law firm Labaton Sucharow. On page 2, in fact, we see here Dr. David Brett is claimed to be an authority in neuropharmacology, molecular pathways, implied mechanisms in the action of Simufilam. He has, well, excellent academic credentials, no doubt about it. He attended, or he got his degree from Johns Hopkins in 1993, and he had varied and distinguished career positions in neuroscience, both in academia and in industry. So undoubtedly, well, we can't say that this person would not know one or two things about the science or many of the scientific aspects in neuropharmacology. So yeah, we leave it at that for now. The second person represented by the law firm is Geoffrey S. Pitt, who has an MD as well as a PhD, and he is a professor at Weill Cornell Medicine. As you can see here, he is a cardiologist and a physician scientist whose research focuses on diseases caused by abnormal function of ion channels. and specialized proteins in cell that control electrical activity. Okay, so if we go back to the filing from November, we see him, of course, also listed here and described as an authority in translational science and ion channels similar to those apparently implicated in the mechanisms of Simufilam. So then, in order to, well, see who are the other participants in our story, we go to the August 18 filing of Labaton Sucharow, and we see here on page 2 then obviously the names of the researchers from Cassava Sciences, who are Dr. Lindsay Burns of Cassava Sciences, as well as Dr. Hao Yang Wang of the City University of New York. So then obviously on the Cassava Sciences website we find Lindsay H. Burns, who has a PhD, and she is the Senior VP of Neuroscience. And she has been a lead scientist on Cassava Sciences' Alzheimer disease program when she, together with Dr. Hao Yang, discovered the novel target ultimately that Simufilam is using in order to treat Alzheimer's disease. She has led the program through medical chemistry, lead profiling, and the IND enabling studies, and so on. And then we have also Remy Barbier, who is the chairman of the board, president, and CEO of Cassava Sciences, and he also happens to be married to Lindsay Burns. And then we have Dr. Wang from the City College of New York, who is an associate medical professor and who is also working in molecular, cellular, and biomedical sciences. He has co-authored many papers with Dr. Lindsay Burns from Cassava Sciences and acts as the outside lab, so to speak, but also as a scientific advisor. In order to keep this video still somewhat short and concise, I'm only going to focus on a few key points. But as you can see in the third supplement to the citizen petition filing, the law firm Labaton and Sucharow state that there is increasing evidence that cassava has doctored research and clinical trial results, duped peer-reviewed journals, and tainted the science to trick the NIH as well as the FDA into approving grants for clinical trials. And in essence, this has also misled investors by touting the grants as well as clinical trial results. It is quite obvious that putting together that much research obviously comes at a price. At the same time, we have to consider that, of course, the interest of a short seller is to provide as much information that would likely have a negative impact on the stock price in order to, actually benefit through short selling of the stock tremendously when the stock price actually does decrease. So we always have to balance what we find in this document with regards to a financial motivation, really wanting to drive the stock price down. Now, I'm not saying that these allegations are true or that they are false, but we always have to keep in mind the underlying motivation that somebody may have to say and write certain things. The Wall Street Journal also have been investigating Cassava Sciences, and a copy of the article published in the journal is actually attached to this submission as well. And this is somewhat, reminds me of how the initial article from the Wall Street Journal actually also contributed quite directly to the downfall of Theranos, if you are familiar with that matter. This third submission of the citizen petition was actually submitted because the FDA have not yet acted actually on the first submission, and as Cassava Sciences are progressing with their phase 3 clinical trial, as you see here, the whistleblowers ultimately want to ensure that potentially no additional patients may get exposed or enrolled actually in the study until all the scientific claims of Simufilam have actually been verified. As you can see here, written due to the seriousness of the concerns about Simufilam and the related research by Cassava Scientists, the whistleblowers, Dr. David Brett, as well as his colleague Geoffrey Pitt, have gone on record officially, including taking great personal as well as professional risks to file these petitions. And at the same time, other prominent scientists and medical doctors actually also have gone voluntarily on record. And these records are ultimately also listed here. This is on the one hand the research by Quintessential Capital, but more so the additional reports that are covered here under the website, actually cassavafraud.com. So one of the key interactions of Simufilam is on the alpha-7 nicotinic acetylcholine receptor in the brain. And this has been also announced in the 2012 paper in the Journal of Neuroscience, which was authored by Dr. Wang and Dr. Burns of Cassava Sciences. This journal article was also subject of the investigation that was triggered by the first citizen petition filed by the law firm. And we look here, of course, the authors are again Dr. Wang as well as Dr. Lindsay Burns. And the mechanism of action is really on the nicotinic acetylcholine receptor alpha-7. And a lot of the work that has been published here is ultimately pinging on the so-called Western blots that you can see, for example, here. So then one of the antibodies that was used, at least according to this journal article, is the alpha-7 antibody with the part number SC5544, which were, amongst many other things, purchased from Santa Cruz Biotechnology. So here we're looking again at the next section in the citizen petition filing, stating that a major problem in this is that the international leaders in the field of the acetylcholine receptor field agree that there are apparently no suitable antibodies for Western blotting for this particular receptor in the brain. Citing also one journal article here from 2007. So the question then clearly arises is if that was known and the publication from Cassava Sciences came out in 2012, what were these Western blots actually identifying and showing? So then that 2007 publication aside, we're looking at the data sheet from Santa Cruz Biotechnology for their antibody capable of apparently detecting the acetylcholine receptor alpha-7. The same part number, of course, as we have found in the publication, SC5544. And you can see here that this is ultimately for the application. So we see it here. So this product is recommended for detection of the acetylcholine receptor alpha-7 of mouse, rat, as well as human origin by Western blotting. So I mean, this is definitely, two different opinions here. At the time, at least, Santa Cruz Biotechnology were selling this precisely for the purpose for which it was actually used by Cassava Sciences. Then, one paper that was cited by the whistleblowers, actually here, a publication in 2007 stating that there are no suitable antibodies for Western blotting. And then at the same time, we have another publication, which is this one here from the Journal of Histochemistry and Cytochemistry. This is from 2017, by the way. And here again, these researchers have evaluated commercially available antibodies for rat alpha nicotinic acetylcholine receptors. So here for rat, of course, but they have also used there's an overview here where they have shown again this a similar part number. Actually, it was up here, the part number 5544, and you can see here that the reported species reactivity is again H, R, and M, so for human, rat, and mouse. So clearly, Santa Cruz Biotechnology were selling this at the time for these applications. Now, the researchers in this publication from 2017 also confirmed that none of these antibodies are really suitable for use with Western blotting. So this confirms ultimately the data from the 2007 publication that was listed here in the dossier from Labaton and Sucharow. Again, now Santa Cruz Biotechnology have discontinued the use or the selling of this product 5544, apparently, probably because it wasn't working. So ultimately, it is not clear when, how the Cassava scientists were aware of this Santa Cruz Biotechnology antibody not working for the Western blotting or not. They claim to have used it. Well, if it really didn't work or doesn't work, sure, then I also have questions. Well, what do these Western blots in their 2012 publication actually show? And if they didn't really show any conclusive data because the antibody doesn't work, well, how do they come then actually to conclusions saying that this is a fundamental mechanism on which Simufilam actually works and can treat Alzheimer's disease? So definitely a valid question, but you see also that they used a product which was clearly sold for the indication and the purpose for which Cassava scientists have actually used it. Now, I think the argumentation in the Labaton Sucharow dossier is a little bit faulty here, at least from a timing perspective. So they say, all of this about the 2012 paper by Wang and Burns. They cite here a paper from 2017. This is the one I just showed you, which indicates that none of these antibodies actually work for Western blotting. But again, this comes out 5 years after the 2012 paper. So you can't really, in my opinion, blame scientists for having done something 5 years earlier if, well, 5 years afterwards, it is shown that a particular product that was used at the time and sold for that indication, in fact, it didn't work. Nevertheless, of course, any good scientist should always question and doubt the results that they get. If indeed this antibody doesn't work to identify this receptor in Western blotting, then really the question is fully valid. Well, what does this paper actually show and what do the results actually mean for Simufilam? The research paper by Labaton and Sucharow also cite that in their 2012 journal article, Dr. Wang and Dr. Burns had used the Santa Cruz antibody with the catalog number SC65844, which, according to Santa Cruz Biotechnology, does only detect the alpha-1 nicotinic acetylcholine receptor, but not the alpha-7. So, quick look here at the 2012 paper by Wang and Burns, and indeed we see here exactly that product being used as well. And when we look at the data sheet from Santa Cruz Biotechnology, again, here is the part number, and we clearly see here the application is for the detection of the R1 or the alpha-1. We see that down here. So definitely not the receptor that actually supposedly is targeted by Simufilam, and it is quite strange why they indeed are using this one. As this video is getting long enough already, I'd like to just stay on the topic of Western blots and actually wrap it up here, at least for part 1 of this video. I'd like to quickly introduce Elizabeth Bick, who is a Dutch microbiologist and scientific integrity consultant. She has no ties, no financial interests into Cassava Sciences whatsoever, but she has, based on a lot of the noise and information or news in the investigations surrounding the science and publications, especially Western blots by Cassava Sciences, actually taken a closer look just out of professional curiosity. and I'll show you the website where she has highlighted a few of her findings and concerns actually. So here's the website for betterscience.com, and I leave, of course, links to all the sources and various online reference material in the description below. But here, so Elizabeth Big took a look as well, as I had mentioned, because of all the news surrounding the investigations into cassava. And this website actually, highlights really quite well some of the key highlights that she found and identified and basically, well, sort of questioned. So let's go quickly through those a little bit. Though first you may have a question, what is Western blotting actually? Because, well, I talk about it quite a lot. So let me quickly explain with the help of Wikipedia for a real concise assessment. So Western blotting is a scientific method that uses gel electrophoresis to separate native proteins in a 3D structure or denatured proteins according to the length of the polypeptide. So proteins are made up of polypeptides. And then they are transferred to an electrophoretic chamber or membrane, and ultimately based on the weight or the length of the peptides, the proteins get separated. Ultimately, the visualization of these proteins is then using specific antibodies that bind to the proteins, and those can then also be well stained antibodies to identify a specific target protein. And in that context, the alpha 7 acetylcholine receptor antibodies came into question that I had just discussed a little bit earlier in the video. And so then just to highlight a few of the findings from Dr. Big on the For Better Science website. So these bands, these are the Western blots that we talked about. These lines ultimately are then the proteins separated by their molecular weight. And of course, you would expect that each protein ultimately has a different appearance in the Western blot. So it is quite strange that if you look at different tissue types and therefore expect different proteins, that in fact, as Big had noted here, the copy from here actually blown up, and from the spinal cord you see those two really look pretty much exactly alike, and this is definitely something that you wouldn't expect in comparing Western blots from two different tissue types. As we scroll further down to another comparison or assessment of Western blots. And one of the issues you can really see in publications, these Western blots are generally not printed at really large, scale. So either the scientists would have to submit the original images that are taken, but of course they are generally embedded in the actually submitted publication. So really enlarging those sometimes is not really possible. Nevertheless, when you do, and this is what Dr. Big did, she blew up this one, the G alpha I image from here. And when she did, you kind of really see here this band. So you see the background is certain shades of gray, but you see a definite defined line here. And this is it really looks like, I have to admit, this really looks like just photoshopping, copy pasting from another Western blot something into this image. Background isn't even blended in, whatever. So this really, when you blow it up, stands really out quite a lot. This is almost like, I can't believe that somebody would try to not even blend in the background somewhat, or try to blur at least the, outline of what was cropped in here. So I can definitely relate and understand that Dr. Big believes that this could be something where the Western blot, in fact, yes, was photoshopped. And then here another very illustrative example of the publication in Biological Psychiatry from 2010. Again, we're looking at Western blots, and well, you can definitely see here the background around these Western blot elements that supposedly will show the alpha-7 nicotinic acetylcholine receptor. Well, this looks different. I mean, it's a clear defined line here. Again, not even try to blend in the background. Again, I have said it before, this definitely looks a lot like it would look if somebody really tried to just copy and paste from a different Western blot into another one, and the background doesn't match. You can see here, ultimately, well, this seems to be, the cropping ends right here. So, uh, I have really doubts here as well, I have to admit. I think I'm going to wrap up the video here. I have highlighted just a few of the examples of, really strange Western blots. The website here for Better Science is still full of plenty of other images, and Dr. Big had, highlighted her concerns and doubts about it. If you're interested, feel free to look at it. But I think I made my point clear. So, final words. Definitely, when it comes to Cassava Sciences, I'd like to believe that they have something really truly proprietary for Alzheimer's disease. It is just too much of a devastating disease not to have a medication that can address this disease. But as Carl Sagan was saying, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidences. And the more I look into it, the more questions, being a scientist myself, I do have as well. So if there is interest, I can definitely continue and try to explain many of the additional other areas of concern that are highlighted in the Labaton Sucharow citizen petition, or the other references I had highlighted earlier in this video. But for now, I leave it there. Plenty of information to digest. I leave it up to you ultimately how you interpret these. Again, my goal was to provide you with an objective view. On the one hand, my previous video really from the point of view that you get when you follow truly the Cassava Sciences press releases. And here, a definitely more critical look if you look at the other sources that have looked at Cassava Sciences and, well, raise really serious questions indeed. Please do let me know what your thoughts are on Cassava Sciences, and also let me know if you'd like me to continue explaining many of the other allegations and concerns surrounding the science and the scientific integrity of Cassava Sciences. I'll be glad to dig a little bit more and explain those. If you have enjoyed this content and you have learned something valuable, please consider liking the video and subscribing to my channel if you haven't already.